Leave this place. Okay. At that time, some Pharisees came to Jesus and said to him, Leave this place and go somewhere else. Herod wants to kill you. He replied, Go tell that fox, I will keep on driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, and on the third day I will reach my goal. In any case, I must press on today and tomorrow and the next day, for surely no prophet can die outside Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you will kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Look at your house is left you to desolate. I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, Blessed he who comes in the name of the Lord. That ends the reading of Luke.
So there is a story about a preacher who he loved to preach. A visitor came to his church, or could have been her church, I know, came to his church maybe in December and heard a sermon that was really excellent. The same visitor came back in July and heard the same story that the clergy told. And then the visitor came back in September, and again, the clergy was saying this exact same thing over and over again. And the visitor said, so why do you repeat those things over and over? And he said, well, for one good reason, if you repeat it enough times, I forgot, what was it again? That was it. He didn't seem to remember. So talk about repetition. I do have a story that I have told here at least 2 other times, and so I beg your forgiveness but I think there's a few more details of the story that I'd like to share this morning. I grew up in a town, Appleton, Wisconsin, which was a sundown town. Anybody know what a sundown town is? It was a town where only Caucasian people were allowed to stay past sundown. Unbelievable. I never knew that until a couple of months ago when I was doing a little research for something. But I grew up in an all-white town, and it was enforced by law in that city. Unbelievable. Didn't know about that, as I say. But there was another person in my church by the name of Jim Zwerg, who was 6 years older than me. I went to the same college he did and joined the same fraternal group that he did. But he went off to, he spent a semester, I think, in one of the primarily African-American colleges. And in the process of doing that, he was so moved to go down and be part of the movement. In fact, he would go down and come back to our youth group, and he would sing songs from the lunch counter sit-ins and tell us the stories of what happened. It was so moving for, like maybe a 15, 16-year-old at that point to hear those stories. Well, that progressed, and eventually he went down and he was one of the Freedom Bus riders. And so he was on a bus that went to was it Birmingham? I think so. I think Birmingham, Alabama. Montgomery, Alabama. And he was the only white person. He was sitting next to John Lewis, the guy who became the congressperson. And when they got off the bus, I checked this, and I want to just read to you what he said I could say. This is his email to me a few months ago. John Lewis and I were on a depot platform when the mob came running at us from several directions. They were screaming, "Kill get him," etc. And we could see the weapons they were carrying. So here's my friend. He's saying, I bowed my head. I asked God to be with me, to keep me nonviolent, and to forgive them. I then immediately had this overwhelming feeling of love and peace. I mean, that's not the feeling I would expect to have, but that's what happened. I knew that at that moment, whether I lived or died, it was going to be okay. I was immediately grabbed, thrown down to the ground, and quickly rendered unconscious. He was in the hospital for like 5 or 6 days, and he was on the cover of Life magazine. But the theme here for me is that this is his picture in the hospital bed in Montgomery, Alabama, back in 1961. He knew what he had to do, and I think once like that, when he bowed his head and he wanted to remain nonviolent, that just opened the floodgates of peace and love. How does that happen? I don't know how that happens, but maybe you've experienced some of those same kind of things, that when you think you're up against the worst, all of a sudden something really surprising and wonderful does happen. So anyway, what I want to say, when he finally knew what he had to do, he was okay, and he asked God's help in it. Now, Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, and in the process, he was challenged. Like, consider that mob of people armed to do you damage. He was braced against Satan, according to the story, and I think he had one of those moments where he knew what he had to do, and he said, when he came out, he said, I'm going to preach good news to the poor. I'll say that again. He's going to preach good news to the poor, freedom to the prisoners, recover sight to the blind. In fact, let's just do this a little back and forth. I'll say the first phrase. Everybody repeat it after me. Good news to the poor, freedom to the prisoners, recover sight to the blind. Now, I think he maybe had one of those experiences where once he said that, he knew that he was armed and armed is the wrong word, I guess, but he knew that he could face, who said that? Fortified. He was fortified, I like that. He was fortified. And he didn't mention that he was quoting Isaiah 61, where it says, Isaiah says, to proclaim good news to the poor, to proclaim freedom to the captives, and release from darkness to the prisoners, and the year of the Lord's favor, and the day of the vengeance of our God. Now, when Jesus quoted Isaiah, he shut the door on vengeance. He didn't read that line. He recited the loving line. So I think in that moment, in the 40 days in the wilderness, Jesus knew what he had to do, and he was then empowered, fortified to do exactly that, and to not go into a fearful existence. This business of knowing what you have to do, we could probably have a whole hour or two of sharing stories about when you finally knew what you had to do. But there is a poem, and Kim is going to read that for us. Oh, here. You might want. I got that.
They'll turn they're so good, our tech team. They just know. This is called The Journey from Mary Oliver. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice. Though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, one voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own that kept you company, as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save.
So when you finally know what you have to do and what you're called to do and what your plan is, there was a woman by the name of Joanne, born in 1965, was divorced, had a single mother, and had wanted to make more of her life in some way. She had a daughter, and one day she was on a railroad trip, and the train got stalled. And so she took out some paper and she began writing. She continued the writing for a few years in coffee shops and cafes and in Edinburgh, and it took years to complete. But when she was done, this person who was what some would say is a nobody. That's not a very flattering thing to say, but anyway, she took 5 years to complete it and was rejected by a dozen publishers. But finally, the Philosopher's Stone was finished, and the Harry Potter series was begun. J.K. Rowling. So a friend of mine is here today. Sorry to spring this on you, Jim. A friend of mine worked in college and hospital administration and even took courses in seminary. And finally, after finishing his working life, knew what he wanted to do. You can correct me later if you want to. So he has started a weekly Sunday night Zoom meeting called Jack Horner's Corner. You've got quite a few people, followers, I think, and it's like every Sunday night, right? He takes a look at things that we have assumed we knew something about. He said there's always more to the story. And what's the backstory? What's behind this? And so there's an intellectual discovery of what's going on. And also it's a very progressive, it's a very multi-faith understanding, a lot of sense of what Judaism does, and I think Hinduism and Buddhism and so on. So if you're looking for I'm not allowed to do commercials, I think. So anyway, Jim, wave a hand. He knew what he wanted to do, and he's doing it. Kim, you're another one of those people. I know you've been wondering for a long time, still wondering. Well, is anybody else here still wondering? Yeah, okay, good. You and a partner, Corey Ashworth, are going to be sponsoring a workshop here on life transitions. And I think you're more interested in more than just the workshop that you're going to be doing. But I think something has probably, I know you've been kind of searching for a while to, what is the thing?
What is the thing? Well, they turned me on.
Oh.
I'm so lucky,
yeah.
Right? It's many things. I want to have an impact on people moving into a third chapter. I want to journey with them. I want people to understand they can have a fulfilled third chapter, whatever that looks like for them. I've got a really cool, interesting, fun, engaging toolkit that I use. This is one of probably a couple of multi-iterations of what my life will look like. The call into spiritual, into being more involved in this place and expanding my capacity for preaching, and all of it's very intertwined. I'm also going through this transition into a third chapter, so I want to journey with those who are doing the same. And my friend Corey is, I'm 61, she's 13 years my senior. And so she is farther ahead on that path. And we've been friends for a long, long time. So
what I love about that is you've had you now know what you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
And how empowering. Was there some kind of a change in your own thinking about it once you knew?
It's been coming.
Yeah.
I've had to find the capacity to, I'm still working full-time, very full-time, and so finding the capacity to hold the space for the terror and the excitement and all about what's coming while closing a chapter that has been my career cocoon for 25 years. So it's a both and space. It's a liminal space, a very liminal space, and it's mostly exciting.
So I wonder how it was for Jesus. I mean, he knew who he was. I think he said, "This is my calling," and it must have emboldened him, fortified him, to say and do things that certainly he knew. I think he knew that he was on a path to being crucified. I think so. I think he did. And yet, that wasn't the important thing. The important thing is this is what he is to be doing. So I guess that's kind of the theme. Once you know what your task is, and you can ask for the presence of the Holy to be with you. Jan Berdewick is another member of our congregation. Are you here, Jan? Nope, not today. Who is a retired clergy and is also, I think, a spiritual companion that you can talk to if you want to set up some times with her. So, people talk about the why. What is our why? What is our goal? What motivates us? What speaks to us? And I think when Jesus was actually in the wilderness, that why came to him. And his whole, I mean, he was already probably 25, 30 years old or so. So it's not as if he had it all together earlier in his life, but once he knew what he was going to do, he was empowered. And he was, I think when he approaches the cross and the nailing to the cross and so on, I can't imagine doing that, anybody doing that to me. But I think, like Jim Zwerg said, I knew that whatever happened to me, I was going to be okay. And I think Jesus must have had that same, like the hen with its wings around you to assure you, to protect you, to hold you, despite anything that happened. So I'm thinking that Jesus had already experienced that from the time of the temptations in the desert throughout those 2 or 3 years that he was risking himself with people. Does this leave you with any additional things to be said? I think I've run to the end of my notes here, or I could start repeating myself, which I... Anybody have a comment? Here, let me bring this to you. Hold it close to your mouth.
Yeah. My 15-year-old granddaughter often says to me, well, prayer doesn't do anything. And then I try to explain, why I think it does. And I think what you had to say about your friend shows the power of prayer. Because when you ask for God, when you really need God, God is there for you.
Boy, that's a challenge for me, because not every prayer, I mean, sometimes it just feels like it's rote. I'm just supposed to say these words, and I do. But really, on odd occasions, when I'm trying to open myself up to the holy, once in a great while, something miraculous happens. And I think it's because of, I've had an experience similar to what Jim Zwerg did. I guess I've told that before here too. Is I was in the middle of a Easter sermon, And I was just struggling because we were planning an Awakenings conference and nothing was going right. People weren't signing up and not yes, I hope you enjoyed it. A lot of people from this church actually came one of those times. But so I was just like a mess. I was just tearing my hair out. I'd try to sleep in the evening and roll back and forth on the pillow and I couldn't get peace at all. And in the middle of the sermon on Easter Sunday, it just lifted off. And I knew it was going to be okay. It was that same thing that Jim Zwerg was talking about. Does that happen? I hope. I mean, I'm not counting on it happening again, but it may. Stephen.
Good morning, everyone. So I started a new job about 3 weeks ago. My supervisor, she's Jamaican descent. She was born and raised in Jamaica, and she's an older lady. And I've been very humble with her. She avoids me. I might think that she might be homophobic, probably, perhaps. But I'm always humble with her, and I know it's a challenge. And every time I go into work every morning, you know, she's in the office, and I'm like, should I just say good morning? Should I give her space? So it's a situation, like you said, it's a challenge, but I'm being humble about it, and I'm trying to educate her, and educate her about being accepting and accepting others. Because my job is to help others, right? We work with the chronically disabled. And my supervisor, she's an older Jamaican descent lady. She's about 60. And I understand. I get it. We all have different beliefs, and culture plays a big part of it. But it's like you said, you know, it's like going through the desert. I know the challenges, but I keep being humble and just keep praying.
Thank you, Stephen. So I wonder if our congregational churches around the country and not just the congregation, but I wonder if church in general is one of those. It's in one of those times where there are challenges on every side, and maybe we're going to be nailed to a cross. Maybe we're just going to wither away and do nothing. I think we have everybody that we need is right here today to be the witness to God's love. I mean, there's nothing keeping us from being who we are, and I think it always asks us to kind of to see it, to know it, and so I would pray this morning that we all have some knowledge or some experience that kind of strengthens us and fortifies us. Amen.